My name is Scott Neely, and I serve at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Spartanburg as minister. We are very grateful to the library for this opportunity, and we want to especially thank Gwen Murta for her long indulgence with us, her long patience over many months to finally get a recording that can be used. We're very, very grateful for the chance to share about our congregation and our movement, and we're delighted to finally arrive at this point. So thank you to the library and especially to Gwen for making this happen. I'm going to invite Ann Garner, who is an intern here and has been a colleague for a number of years with me in this congregation, to introduce herself as well.
Hey, like Scott said, I'm Ann Garner. I am finishing up my Master of Divinity at Christian Theological Seminary in Indianapolis, Indiana. I am like 4 papers away from being done, so I'm very ready for that. But part of that involved engaging in a supervised ministry for a year, and I ended up here through a mutual friend, and 1 year turned into 2 years, and it has just been a great experience for me. So glad to be here.
We cared very much to do this presentation together, one, because we're colleagues and we work very closely as a team, but also because the way that we work, we hope, is representative of Unitarian Universalism. And so we hope that by doing this together, more of who we are as a religious movement will come through to you in the presentation. When folks ask what Unitarian Universalism is, they sometimes ask, is this a religion? Is this a philosophy? What is Unitarian Universalism? And true to form, true to the UU philosophy and theology, there are many ways to answer that. But the way that I would describe it is that this is a movement. It is a movement of people from many different backgrounds, many different beliefs, who join together to support one another in our spiritual paths and to do work in the world that we hope makes a difference, that really matters. Unitarian Universalism is a multi-religious movement. People join together across many different faith backgrounds. In the congregation in Spartanburg, we have people who come from Christian backgrounds, Jewish backgrounds, who are Buddhist, who are pagan, who are atheist, who are agnostic, people who are transcendentalists, many different kinds of folks from many different worldviews who find value in this congregation of difference, that there is something wonderful that happens when we gather across those differences and support one another's spiritual paths in order to show up in the world together. Some of us attend other congregations as well in connection with our spiritual formation, our spiritual background. And for some of us, this is it. We really are a varied group. And we know that it is unusual to think of a church or a congregation that meets not for the sake of shared belief, but in fact because of that difference. And nonetheless, that is what brings us together. We are a place of mutual support. And what that creates in us is wonderful. When we try to articulate what it is that we're about, what it is that we're doing, one expression of that is to say that we care for one another and for our community. And what we hope to share with you today is an elucidation of that care that we have for one another and for our wider community. When we gather as a congregation, whenever we gather, we light a chalice. This chalice is a flame, and it's a symbol that can be interpreted in many ways. For some, it's just light and all the meaning that is resonant in the image of light. For others, it is the light of enlightenment, the enlightenment that comes through reason, as in the enlightenment out of Western Europe, the practice of reason and critical thought to help us make strong, logical, democratic decisions, that humanist tradition that comes to us out of the West. For others of us, it is the enlightenment of meditation, of Hinduism and Buddhism, the eternal flame of wisdom that we can find if we will focus and engage the world with mindfulness. It is also a light of resistance. This image really took hold in our congregations and in this movement during World War II, and as an act of resistance to domination and oppression. And that work of justice is a major part of the life of our congregations and of this movement. And I think perhaps above all the meanings that this eternal flame can hold for each of us, I think above all, it's a light of hospitality, that we light this chalice as a sign of warmth and illumination and welcome, so that wherever we all come from and for whatever reason, whoever we are, whatever has brought us here, we can find a place here. We don't always do that as well as we would like. Sometimes we flat out fail at it. But part of our practice, week in and week out, to offer a space for one another, to care for one another, and to extend that care without condition and without limit to every person who finds a connection with this community. And so we want to begin today again with gratitude to the library and to Gwen, and to all of you for showing up, for engaging with us. We offer the lighting of this chalice as an act of hospitality, that we will all find a place together, wherever our differences are. We're glad you're here today.
So one of the ways that we do this is through a covenant. The UU movement does not operate out of dogmas or creeds, but there are covenants. The first time that I came to visit UUCS, when I was in conversation with Scott about this supervised ministry, I sat down and read this covenant, and it gave me chills and really about brought me to tears, because I realized that this is the kind of place that I want to be a part of. The covenant guides how we live together and operate and function both within this congregation and within the greater world. It helps us support each other in whatever that we are doing and whatever path that we are journeying together on. The covenant that you see here was written by members of this congregation in 2014. And it started in covenant groups that are small groups that operate and function in the church, of people who care deeply, and they crafted these words, and it was brought to the congregation and eventually voted on, and we try to live into this covenant. Every Sunday, we speak it together. The words are spoken with real intention, and we really do try to live into it. So I would like to just read the words to you or with you as you see them on the screen. We are a people of faith and hope. Together we covenant to strive to become our better selves, to honor both the critical mind and the generous heart, to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness, and to respond to systems of violence and oppression with the power of a love beyond belief. I think that many organizations have mission statements and vision statements that try to capture who they are, and I don't think they always hit the mark on that. But I do think that UUCS has done that very well with this covenant, to show who we are, and at the very least to show who we really strive hard to be every day. So I kind of want to walk through the covenant with you, the different lines, and a little bit of what it means to me to be part of this church as it relates to the covenant. So we are a people of faith and hope. Together we covenant to strive to become our better selves. That is so true here. There are many places that I don't think you can bring your full self, but this is a place of true authenticity. And you really can be who you are, and there are ways to grow and become the better selves that we know that we can be. I think a lot that when we become our better selves, then we can do so much more to create a better world for all people. As Maya Angelou says, do the best you can until you know better. When you know better, do better. And so those words speak to me when I think about this. And together we covenant to honor both the critical mind and the generous heart. I love that about this place because you don't have to give up one for the other. We can listen to our minds and listen to our hearts. It is not one or the other. We can embrace both. So I'm grateful that we get to do that here. I don't think that's always welcome everywhere. We covenant to prove that diversity need not mean divisiveness. I think diversity is sometimes a word that stirs up all kinds of emotions, and many people seem to be scared of it. But to me, I think it's a beautiful thing. It gives us opportunities to learn from one another and to experience different cultures and different people and just different ways of being. I grew up in the military, moving around most of my life. And so it gave me opportunities to live in different cultures and experience different people. And so I think it shapes the way that I see the world, and it allows me to see the beauty in this, in diversity, and in embracing those things that really a lot of people think they separate us, but really we can learn to help those things be bridges and bring us closer together. I think diversity is a true gift. And then to respond to systems of violence and oppression with the power of a love beyond belief. This is my favorite part because I feel like it is where the action is. It is where the social justice comes in that is such a part of UU and very much a part of this church. It is what we do. I often think of social justice as love as a verb. In one of my classes, we read some of feminist author Bell Hooks. Said, all the great movements for social justice in our society have emphasized a love ethic. And I just think that fits so well within this movement. When we make the world a better place, it has to come from love. But that can be difficult sometimes, and it requires us to be vulnerable and courageous, but I think it is worth it. Cornel West says, never forget that justice is what love looks like in public. This church and the UU movement in general is about justice and about loving all people. So it's no wonder I think about that quote when I think about this place. I think this is the work of life, and it is the work of church. And I think this church does this very well.
You'll notice that this is a covenant and not a creed. This is a community that's not based in shared belief or in doctrine. In fact, our beliefs vary. They are different from one another. But a covenant is a promise of unconditional relationship, that no matter what you do, I will be in relationship with you faithfully. And so power of a covenant is to bind us across those differences in shared community and ultimately in shared action in the world. For those of you who are familiar with covenantal language, both in our legal philosophies and also in our Judeo-Christian tradition, coming out of the Hebrew scriptures, you will recognize that covenant is a very old way of thinking. It is a profoundly old tradition, and so in this way, I think it's right to say that the UU movement is radical. It tries to go to some of the oldest values and to make them very relevant today. That rather than asking for conformity, we ask for connection. And rather than ask for shared belief, we ask for striving together. And that is the weekly function of this covenant in our life together. Love beyond belief. That is the concluding word of our covenant, and it is the ethic that guides our congregation. It's the spirit of this UU movement. The question that we ask ourselves is, if we strive for love, if love is our ultimate value, then how do we live it? Because this is not first about believing in love, but about how we live love in our lives. I know that that is true for many denominations and for many religions. We are not unique in that. But our particular motivation, push the love ethic as far as possible, to push that value of love as far as we are possibly able to do. What does it mean to live as if every person matters? To love everyone without condition or limit. Our goal is to hold one another accountable to that, to constantly stretch our minds and our ideas, to constantly challenge one another's thinking and actions, so that we are ever expanding in the practice of love, however flawed and limited each iteration of that is for us. This is an image of our congregation marching in the Upstate Pride March and Festival, a program that we are proud to be a part of every year in support of and in solidarity with the LGBTQ community across the Upstate, and a festival that we are very proud began in our parking lot just over a decade ago. It was a group of folks from this congregation that, in concert with members of the LGBTQ community in our congregation and in the Upstate community, decided that it was time for a public show of support and organized the March and Festival. It has grown far beyond our congregation, and we're very, very proud that it has gone way beyond us. And we are proud to be one small part of it ongoing year to year now. This is love beyond belief. Thomas Starr King was both a Universalist and a Unitarian minister before the two movements merged. The movements merged in 1961, but he lived 100 years before that, during the time of the Civil War. He was the son of a Universalist minister and became the Unitarian minister at the Unitarian congregation in San Francisco. He has a saying which summarizes these two strands of an interwoven movement. The Universalists and the Unitarians were two separate movements that grew together. And Thomas Starr King articulated this by saying, the Universalists believe that God is too good to damn humanity. In other words, a loving God would seek love for all people and would never choose damnation for anyone. While the Unitarians believe that humanity is too good to be damned by God. Just draw this out a little more so you can see some of our origins. Unitarian Universalism comes out of the radical Protestant traditions of Western Europe and early North America. It comes out of two movements that were outgrowths of Calvinism, particularly in the Northeast. Universalists did not believe that a loving God would order a universe that excluded people in any way. And so this ethic of huge embrace of everyone is welcome comes especially out of our Universalist roots. This idea that love is for everyone without condition or exception. And if that is our theology, how do we live that? The Unitarians took a different approach. They emphasized the ethic of the Hebrew and Christian traditions. How did Jesus and the early Christians live? And what would it mean to focus on that? So a very this-worldly, humanistic approach, that humanity is good, and we can be good if we will choose to be, if we will do that work. Two very different approaches, but that are, though not the same, highly compatible. And over time, Universalists and Unitarians grew together to merge into this shared movement. Thomas Starr King was both, and his theology and his words are expressive of this. But as powerful as these ideas are, it's his life that really shows us the power of the ideas. And this is a recurring concern for Unitarian Universalists. We want our ideas to be sharp so that they help us live, and it's the living that matters. Thomas Starr King was a major force, credited by Abraham Lincoln as the major force to keep California in the Union and to make it on the side of reunifying the fractured United States during the Civil War. During the Civil War, he helped to organize the Pacific branch of the United States Sanitary Commission, which raised money and medical supplies for wounded soldiers and was the predecessor of the American Red Cross. His life is evidence of the ideas. And now, the movement of Unitarian Universalism has moved beyond its radical Protestant roots and even beyond its Universalist and Unitarian roots to strive to become a truly multi-religious movement, so that we have roots that come from all over the world and from religious traditions all over the world, always challenging ourselves to realize that where we each come from is of equal value. And the traditions and insights that we each bring offer us wisdom and also necessarily incomplete views, so that we are constantly providing one another with more and more resources, spiritual and philosophical and human resources, in order to support one another in the living of our lives. In short, all of our lives afford each of us ever-renewing spiritual resources. These are our roots, and roots that we have grown from and that we have also grown beyond. An image of a mural that's just been painted on one side of our church building this summer. It's the mural in honor of the Grimke sisters, Angelina and Sarah Grimke, who were born into white families of privilege in Charleston, traveled to Spartanburg County every summer of their childhood to be on a family farm. But as they became aware of the injustices of enslavement, they became abolitionists. And when they were criticized as women for being abolitionists, they also became part of the first wave of feminism and women who fought for women's equal rights. They were major voices in both abolitionism and in the suffrage movement, women's suffrage movement in the 19th century. And we have had painted for us by the local artist Nancy Corbin and depicted on our building as an act by the League of Women Voters, a partner organization that we are in connection with, proudly housed on our church walls, this mural in recognition of the power of working together across all of our differences. The rainbow, you can see the depiction of multi-ethnic coalition, female figures that are lifting us all in hope. And the people who are here are not members of our congregation, but are leaders in the South Converse neighborhood and in our whole community, leaders in the League of Women Voters and throughout Spartanburg, who were part of the dedication and who shows the embodiment of the highest ideals of this mural. The theological freedom that is a part of Unitarian Universalism, this desire to not be bound by belief, but to constantly push our thinking and seek fuller and fuller sources of wisdom, leads to prophetic social action. In every era of our movement, from its very beginnings down through today, reformers, leaders, activists, writers, thinkers in the vanguard of social movements, pushing for greater rights and greater justice in our society, have come from the Unitarian and Universalist movement. A very large number of leaders in the forefront of social movement in the United States have been Unitarian or Universalist, or since the merger, Unitarian Universalist, a number that is far larger and disproportionate in size, the relative small size of our movement. The point here is that there is something about the religious and theological freedom of this movement that empowers members of this movement to see the world in a new way, to identify where we need to break forward, where we need to make a move, push our whole society forward. And although the work is hard, and although it is work in which we persist for decades, it does move us forward. It is a proud part of our heritage. And again, is an embodiment of this idea that, that we are not only concerned with ideas and beliefs, but with living them, with embodying them, with our lives speaking this truth. You can see this in the history of the Spartanburg congregation itself. About every decade of our existence, this small congregation has started a work of social justice that has then grown beyond us and become something much larger than anything the congregation itself can claim to be numerically. We began as a single Sunday school class at a small independent Baptist church in one of Spartanburg's mill villages. It was a church that was not connected to a particular mill. And so the members of that Sunday school class began to speak out for labor rights. They got in a lot of trouble with mills and with mill owners, but their freedom of conscience, their theological freedom, led them to speak out for labor rights at a crucial time during the heyday of the textile industry in Spartanburg County. And out of that Sunday school class grew the origins of the Unitarian Universalist Church in Spartanburg, formally organized in 1954. And from those early decades in the 40s and 50s fighting for labor rights to creating a church whose is theological freedom, radical theological freedom, in a community where there's often a great deal of pressure to be more theologically conservative, to fighting for civil rights in the 1960s, a fight that actually split this congregation, as the congregation chose to stand with people of color in the movement for civil rights, to mental health advocacy and being a place where mental health nonprofits could gain a foothold and be housed while they built support rather than suffer being seen as outsiders and the stigma that goes with mental health advocacy, to being the place where Upstate Pride Festival and March began right in our parking lot, to the development of the Spartanburg Earth Day Festival and fighting for climate justice and ecological justice in partnership with organizations in Spartanburg and across the state. We are very proud in our own small way to strive to see more clearly where our society needs to move in order to be more inclusive and more diverse and more just, to make the world more livable for us all. And our theological positions, our theological freedom helps us take those actions, connecting with partners and pushing for a world that is a space for all of us to thrive. Our goal in all of this is love, and love beyond belief, so that the living and expression of that love can be ever expansive, opening up more and more to the promise of what it can be. We are striving to live love beyond belief. I want to ask Anne, because Anne comes from outside of this tradition, as do I, and has been with us for 2 years as an intern, has been learning about this tradition. What does it mean to you to be a part of this UU movement? What does it mean to you to be a part of all of this?
So anyone who really knows me knows that love is a guiding force in my life. I've painted or made signs that say love is the way or love is louder, and those are things that often come out of my mouth. So when I realized that love is so central to what is the UU movement, but especially in this church, I knew that I had found my people. This congregation loves deeply. They love each other, they care deeply for each other, and they love the community, and the world. And the ways that they show that love is just kind of amazing to me. And some of the examples that Scott has mentioned of things that they have done. I think one of the biggest things is this feeling of authenticity. So we love each other as we are, as we walk in the door. And I think church should be that way. And I've always thought church should be that way, but it's not in many, many places. But here it is. You truly can be yourself, and you are loved for who you are. Just kind of to repeat, just the care that this place gives for one another in everything that they do is just deep to the core of this place. And it speaks to me, I guess. And it's not a superficial care. It is not a, hey, how are you doing? And expect to hear, I'm fine. You really ask that question because you really want to know how someone is doing. And in this place, you can answer with how you really are doing and know that you are heard and you are loved no matter what. Love is found here in radical welcome. I think all of these things are tied together. The caring deeply and being authentic and just being welcome. You don't find that everywhere, but this place does it really, really well. So in this place, I do find a love beyond belief. I think this place does it very, very well. And I am very grateful to be here because they are my people.
My my own life path has been in a small way a kind of followed the arc of the Unitarian Universalist history itself. I grew up in the Baptist church and served for many years in the Presbyterian church. My family are still members and deeply connected with the Presbyterian church that we very much love. And those parts of my background are deep rooted and rich. They offered me a lot. Over the course of my life, I traveled the world and lived and spent time with people of many different religious traditions. And I saw the presence of divinity in every life around me. And I saw the need to fight for a more just and livable world for everyone, and how often we fall short of that, and how often religion actually interferes with that and inhibits that. It was an experience of calling that brought me here to minister. It's not something I was seeking or looking for. It was a very powerful experience, and I'm grateful for the discovery of this. So I come out of those Protestant and Calvinist roots and have come into this more radical tradition. And my experience of that is one of great gratitude. After I'd been here for a little while as minister, I was sharing a meal with a friend, someone who is a theologian and has much more extensive theological training than I do. I've got a graduate degree, but this person has gone way beyond that. And in the course of our conversation, they were asking about work and all that we were doing, and I was telling them about the ethos of this congregation and what we do. And they stopped me and said, you just got to tell me, what is it that Unitarian Universalists believe? What is it that you all believe? And you've heard me explain now that this is not a place of belief. This is a place that strives to go beyond belief, a place where our beliefs are all different. We're trying to connect in another way, to support one another and to work together. So I explained that, and I said, I think fundamentally what we're trying to do here is to be a place where we are all free to love in exactly who we are, just as we are, and with regard for one another, just as one another is. Who I am is good just as I am, and who you are is good just as you are. We can push each other and try to grow more and more to evolve as human beings. But fundamentally, I accept myself and I accept you. You accept yourself and you accept me as we are. We are both liberated. We are both free to love without condition and without limit, and to push each other in that as we gather as a congregation. So I said, I think fundamentally what we're about is helping one another be free to love. And this person of far greater theological training than I have dropped his fork and said, "Holy blank!" You can fill in the word. Holy blank! That's everything. And I think he's right. It is holy. It is holy to go to the roots, to draw on the depth of the tradition in order to try to do it in a radical way, in a way that breaks new ground, holy ground, to try to genuinely love without limit or condition, so that this world is more livable for us all, always challenging one another to push further, but accepting one another without condition or limit, just as we are. Unitarian Universalism is a movement that is built out of innumerable sources of all of our lives, all of our beliefs, all of our traditions, all of our backgrounds. None complete, all feeding and nurturing and pushing one another further. It's a movement of freedom to love and to act with one another and for one another, with all of us and for all of us. And that's what we would want to leave with you today, that we are free to love without limit and without exception, always pushing one another further. Love beyond belief. We want to say thank you again to the library for this opportunity, for allowing us to do this in this format, and Gwen especially for more than 5 months of patience and coordinating. Thank you so much for this. Really grateful.